All right. So on to the point of today. This is the plan. We'll be going just some quick important vocabulary so everyone is on the same page. Then I'll walk through the application requirements in, point out the application requirements in the 2020 permit. I'll show the video that goes through each of the tabs on the TMDL application form and demonstrate how to fill out the form. And then we'll head over to the stormwater manual and the agency website so I can point out important resources. We'll wrap up with your questions, but please stop me at any time or send a note to Carly if you have questions about you're totally lost about what we're talking about. And I'm assuming, Carly, you can unmute when you want. If you can't, let me know. Oh, you can't. Okay, hold on. I sent you an unmute request. Sorry, guys. Hold on a second. Well, now you're unmuted, Carly. I can't find the option to make you a co-host.
Oh, okay. That's fine, I guess. If you just maybe right click over my name or and assign my role.
I can make you a presenter, and that's it.
Oh, okay. I'll try to be quiet. And hopefully my dog will be quiet too.
Here, let me exit out of this. Sorry, everyone, for the technical difficulties. You should have known. Hold on a second. I think I found it, if I can get it back. There we go. I think you're co-host now. Did it work? Sorry, everyone. Hold on, bear with us for a second. There we go. Okay, now we're good. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled. Okay. Moving on. All right, so what is a TMDL, or total maximum daily load? It's several things. It's both an equation and a report. And a TMDL requirement is triggered once a water body has been found to not meet the standards, which in MPCA language means that it is impaired or polluted. It can be polluted by lots of different things, by one thing, by chloride, by nutrients, by sediment, bacteria, etc., or a mixture of things. So once a water body has been found to be polluted, then because of the Clean Water Act, we have to come up with a recipe to get that water body back to a healthy state. So we work in cooperation with local governments and sometimes consultants to develop these total maximum daily loads. And then we submit both the report and the equation to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and then they approve it. Once it's approved, then it triggers MS4 permit requirements in the future. So here is, you can see in the bottom right, you can see the equation itself. This is, in the table that's shown here is an example of a TMDL table. So we are concerned with the WLA portion, and that's the amount of pollutant that point sources are allowed to send to an impaired water. So all of this whole section is the waste load allocation section. So point sources like MS4s, wastewater treatment plants, construction, industrial stormwater are included in that section of the equation. The LA section down here, that's non-point sources, so unregulated MS4 stormwater, agriculture, general runoff in the watershed that contributes the pollutant of concern to the impaired water. And so every impaired water gets a separate TMDL for each pollutant. So you can have one stream that's impaired for nutrients, bacteria, and total suspended solids, for example. That means it would get 3 different TMDL equations. And those separate TMDLs can be all in one report. They can be in separate reports. It depends on lots of different things. The timing of when the impairment was discovered, what some of the sources could be. Lots of different things play into when a TMDL actually gets completed if there's several of them. So there's a lot of impaired water bodies across the state, so it gets to be a lot to keep track of. So we started putting them all in one spreadsheet. We keep track of all of the waste load allocations that are assigned to MS4 permittees on the TMDL waste load allocation list. And as of the November 16th issuance date of this permit, there were 3,080 approved waste load allocations. Now, some of those waste load allocations no longer need to be reported on because the water bodies have been delisted, which means they are meeting the standards or are clean, quote unquote, clean again, or healthy, or they don't need to be reported on because the permittees have no required reductions. So overall, there are almost 2,300 waste load allocations that do need to be reported on. So again, that's a lot. So a little trip down memory lane. As part of the 2013 permit in the last permit cycle, it was up to the MS4 permittees to check the TMDL waste load allocation spreadsheet and then list all of their waste load allocations and corresponding BMPs, as well as their compliance schedule. This time around, we created custom workbooks for every single permittee that has a waste load allocation to help get you started. But before we dive into the TMDL application form itself, and this is the screenshot of the front page of everyone's, I wanted to go through some of the permit requirements that are in the 2020 general permit just to help explain. It'll help everyone understand how the application was put together the way it was. So, okay, permit item 12.8 is for the waste load allocations that relate to oxygen demand, nitrate, total suspended solids, or total phosphorus. So this is where the work to complete the TMDL application form comes in. You have to decide if you're meeting each applicable waste load allocation for those pollutants or not. And then if you're not, you have to, this permit requirement is saying you have to develop a compliance schedule, and that's composed of the permit items A through D under 12.8. So all of that's captured in the TMDL application form. Permit item 12.9 is for applicable waste load allocations for bacteria, chloride, and temperature. And all of this information is captured by the PDF portion of the permit application. So none of, you don't need to put anything in the spreadsheet form for if you have bacteria, chloride, and temperature waste load allocations. But you can see if you have waste load allocations for those pollutants in the TMDL application form. That tab is just for information purposes. And then permit item 12.10 is the other half of permit item 12.8. So 12.8 was if you're not meeting waste load allocations for oxygen demand nitrate, TSS, or TP, you have to do a compliance schedule. This part is saying if you are meeting, then you have to put in the information for permit items 12.10 A through C. And that's all goes into the TMDL application form, or you're keeping it on file in your records. So again, you have to decide if you're meeting each applicable waste load allocation or not before you can complete the form. And we just wanted to mention, just a note, we won't be looking back at what you put in your 2013 application. The program feels like there are more resources and information available to permittees this permit cycle. So that'll enable you to make a more accurate determination about how you're doing towards meeting waste load allocations. So there are lots of different ways to reach the TMDL application FTP site, which is where you download the form. And we're just curious as to how many people have downloaded their form. Oops, not that, sorry. So I have a little quick poll. Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. So I will open this up, and we just want to know if you have downloaded your TMDL application form or not. So you should just be able to click yes or no and then hit submit. I'll just leave this open for a minute or so. People are answering. We've got 137 people on the WebEx right now, so thanks for joining us. Looks like the yeses are winning so far. And again, this is just for curiosity's sake. Nobody gets a ding if they haven't downloaded their application yet. All right. Anyone else wants to click submit? Looks like we've got 50 folks that haven't answered yet, but in the sake of moving on, we'll close the poll. I'll give it, okay. Oh, they're giving you a 15-second. I don't want to do that. Oh, click submit if you put in an answer. Let's see if that'll. Three, two, one. There we go. All right, so we've got 68 yeses, 26 nos. So again, I was just curious. So, all right. So here's some of the places, but we'll go through this a little more thoroughly. Let me close that for now. Okay, so first place you might find a link to it is on the PDF application. When it gets to the TMDL section, that hyperlink will bring you to the guidance page where you can find it. So if you clicked on that link, then that'll bring you to one location where you can get it. Or if you went to the MPCA website and or Google search the 2020 MS4 general permit were the first result. And then if you click on that TMDL application form, it'll bring you to the stormwater manual page. And on this page, it's a high-level summary along with the video that we'll be playing later. And then if you click on that link, it takes you directly to the FTP site where everyone's application is in alphabetical order. So you just click your name and download it. All right. Okay. So next, we are going to play the video that is found on that page because it's a pretty good run through of each of the tabs on the application form. So if you've already seen it, you get a break, and then we'll have just a quick Q&A about if anyone has questions about finding, downloading, saving, or opening the application form before we move on to other resources. So give me a second while I switch over to the video. So just one moment. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So I will start this video. Hopefully it works right.
Welcome to the introduction to the MS4 Permit TMDL application video. I'm going to take about the next 15 minutes to walk through the content and functionality of this workbook. To begin, we are starting at the point where you have gone to the website and found your municipality's customized workbook. You can confirm that you're working in the right one by checking this cell right here. It should list the name of your municipality, whether it's city, township, county, correctional facility, university, et cetera, et cetera. So if this doesn't have your municipality's name, go back to the website and find the correct one. So when you download it, you might notice that there is this warning in the upper left corner saying that the macros have been disabled and asking if you want to enable the content. For this workbook to function, you must click Enable Content when opening, and then save it as a macro-enabled spreadsheet, which means a .xlsm type file, which is how it's saved now. So click the Enable Content button. All right, so to begin, this form is related to applicable waste load allocations. There are 8 different tabs in this workbook, and we'll talk about each one. So first, we'll talk about the notes for this workbook. Like I said, this is a macro-enabled spreadsheet, so you have to save it as macro-enabled file. If you need to clear a cell, please use the delete button and not the backspace button. Some entries are optional, and you should look at the column header to identify cells that are optional or required, and I'll point those out when we're going through the different tabs. The workbook contains protected cells that will allow you to enter values, but please don't delete or change the coding. So of the 8 tabs, the worksheets with white tabs are for information only and don't require any input from the applicant, and then the worksheets with green tabs may require information. This section here describes what is in each tab. The questions section, as you're working through the workbook, if you have questions on how to complete the form, please go to the stormwater manual and the link is here. If you cannot find what you're looking for, then feel free to reach out to the MS4 staff. And click on that link, it will take you to our stormwater page. If you scroll to the bottom, you can find all of our contact information. I'm Anna Bosch. I'm the TMDL liaison. And if you have questions specific to this form, you can please reach out to me. All right. All right, and that is the information tab of the workbook. We'll move on to the bacteria, chloride, and temp tab. This, as you can see by the white, it is another informational tab for you. This will help you answer questions in 141, 146, and 151 in the MS4 Part 2 permit application. It tells you whether or not you have applicable waste load allocations for bacteria, temperature, or chloride. So if you have any applicable waste load allocations for those pollutants, they will be found below that header in this section. So this municipality has waste load allocations for both chloride and for E. coli. So you can see them listed there. If this section is blank, that means you do not have any applicable waste load allocations for bacteria, temperature, or chloride, which means you would check the no box to those corresponding questions in the MS4 Part 2 permit application. So again, this tab is for informational purposes for you only to help you complete the other part of the permit application. We'll move on to the applicable waste load allocations determination tab. This is where all the action happens. There's a lot of information here. The rest of the workbook is based on this tab and the answers you put into column B. So we'll talk about all the different pieces. Up until this point, if you looked at these other tabs, they would be blank because you have not entered any, over here, you have not entered any answers into that column I showed you previously. Oops. If you had answered on that other page, those would be filled in. Okay, back to the applicable waste load allocations determination tab. So this tab lists all of your applicable oxygen demand, nitrate, total phosphorus, total suspended solids, or, I already said total phosphorus projects. They are listed by, you can see, by the TMDL project name, and then followed by the water body name, the water body ID number, and then the specific pollutant. So this one's total phosphorus, this one's total suspended solids, total phosphorus, total phosphorus. So that's in column A. Again, if you come to this page and there's nothing in this section, that means you have no applicable waste load allocations to report on in this application. Column A lists just the project names, water bodies, and pollutants. Column D and over lists the same names, but then if you scroll over, it also lists the numeric waste load allocations for each project and pollutant and water body. So column D again lists the names, which are the same as in column A. Column E lists whether it's a individual or categorical waste load allocation type, which you need this information to complete, fill out another tab. Here's the numerical waste load allocations, the units, and the corresponding flow condition, as well as the corresponding percent reduction for each of those waste load allocations. And then if there are any notes associated with that project. All of this information is coming from the TMDL master list tab, which is the last white tab in the workbook. So we'll just show you this quickly. This table is for reference only, and it shows all of your waste load allocations assigned to an MS4 with all flow zones, whether you need to report on it in this application or not. So if you come over here, you can see that has all the pollutants as well as all the percent reductions. There's some 0% reductions that you would not have to report out on. This also is a filtered list, so you can change, you can look at other permittees if you wanted to know who else has a waste load allocation for this water body ID. If it was a categorical, for example, you can change these filters. Currently, they are set up just for your municipality when you open it up, but this, you can edit this page as you wish. Okay, let's go back to the applicable waste load allocations determination tab. So you have done your calculations and you've decided whether you are meeting your waste load allocations for your projects or not. So you would come to this column B on the applicable waste load allocations determination tab and type in yes. Well, actually, I'm going to say we are not meeting your TP. Say you are meeting the TSS for this water body. Yes, this one. No. So once you've typed in yes or no one time, you can just put in a no or a Y and they will autofill. But please make sure that there are no spaces when you type in your first yes or no or afterwards, or the macro will not work properly. So I'll just fill in the rest of these so we have something to look at as we go through the rest of the workbook. There will be guidance shared on how to determine if you are meeting your waste load allocations or not. Okay, I have filled in this column for all of my applicable waste load allocations. So now I'm ready to click this button in cell A7. This is a macro. So if I click on that red text, it's populated the rest of the tabs. It tells me that I know it's worked. If I have workbook auto populated, continue to other tabs. If you hit the macro and it doesn't work, make sure you may have to close and reopen. Hopefully not. All right, so that's done. So let's go. If I say I'm not meeting my waste load allocation, that means I need to complete the compliance schedule for those associated waste load allocations. So let's go to that tab next. So it's auto-filled all of the projects that I said I am not meeting my waste load allocation. Up here you can see this is related permit item 12.8. Has the directions for this tab. More guidance can be found if you click on that link. Just to show you what you'll type in your target year where your waste load allocation will be achieved, your estimated pollutant reduction, and then your method for calculating that reduction, which is a drop-down menu. These are your choices. So you fill that out for each of these projects. You also, if you say you are not meeting your waste load allocations, you also need to fill out the compliance schedule BMPs tab. Again, all the projects have auto-filled and starting in E5 and over. So you come here, you use the drop-downs to fill in what best management practice or activities you are going to construct or implement during the next permit cycle. Depending on what you answer in your BMP, changes your options for your descriptions. This, you can type in a number, that's optional. Both of these columns are optional. This one is required, this one is required. So you need to put in your expected implementation years. You may enter multiple values via the drop-down, just keep clicking till you have when you're planning to implement those. And then you come to this one, if that constructed basin will assist you in meeting your TP waste load allocation for the Coon Creek, then you put your X in there. And if this will help this one, you click your X there. All right. So those are for if waste load allocations that you are not meeting, you fill out the compliance schedule tab and the compliance schedule BMPs tab. For waste load allocations that you are meeting, you will fill out the reductions for waste load allocation met tab and the BMPs for waste load allocations met tab. So let's go to those next. Again, you can see these are the waste load allocations I said I'm meeting. So they're auto-filled. You go here, say, how are you claiming to meet it? These are your options from the drop-down. This is where you put in your estimated reduction, and the value you put in here corresponds to these units you put here. The methods are, again, your drop-down. Or if you used another, if you clicked other here, you type it in your other model there. These are all required columns. Do you have the calculations available on file? Yes or no? Scroll over here. Is this part of a categorical waste load allocation? Again, recall that you can find that information in column E on the applicable waste load allocations determination tab. So if we go back and look, let's check which project we're looking at, Coon Creek TSS. If we go back to our applicable waste load allocations determination tab, Coon Creek TSS right here. Oh, sorry, the Coon Creek TSS there is the one we want to look at. Our waste load allocation type is individual, so that is not a categorical waste load allocation. So we go back to our reductions for waste load allocation met tab and say, no, that is not part of a categorical waste load allocation, which means that autofills, this is not, you don't have to worry about it. You can put in not applicable because it's not categorical. And then if you have any notes related to your calculations, you can put them in the optional column over here, column J, I believe that is. So you filled out your reductions for waste load allocations met tab for all of your projects. So you said you were not meeting 7, so you'd fill in all of these columns for those 7 projects. And then you move on to your BMPs for waste load allocations met tab. Again, all your projects you say you are meeting your waste load allocation will be auto-filled here. You fill in your best management practices. Again, you have your drop downs for your description, which is optional. Drop down, implementation year, type that in. If you are lumping multiple BMPs, so if you have a bunch of swales, you can say, yes, I'm lumping, which then means you do not have to put in geographic coordinates. If you are not lumping, then you do need to fill in coordinates. Owner, either you, if it's you, then you don't need to worry about the other owner cell. If it is somebody else, then you need to enter the owner here. It's optional to fill in your estimated reductions for each pollutant. And then this is where you would say this BMP corresponds to this TMDL project. So you want to make sure you fill in whatever makes sense for those. And if you decide you've been working on this, you decide I am not meeting a waste load allocation, or I am meeting one that you said the opposite originally. If you have to change an answer, change it, then you also need to hit the macro button again, which means it would change what is found on the other tabs, but the other information won't move. So it would cause some issues if you change answers after you've been putting data in here. So I would encourage you to be confident in your decisions before you start. If you have any further questions on how to complete the workbook, again, let's go back to the information tab. You can find any of the MS4 staff contact information at the bottom of the stormwater page. Oops, sorry. And again, I'm Anna Bosch. I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, so there was your overview. Let me close that one out. So, and that is found on the guidance page. We'll go, let's see here. So if you Google total maximum daily loads on the Minnesota Stormwater Manual, brings you to this page. So this is what we're going to talk about next, some of the guidance that we have. Well, it's all helpful. This guidance for completing the MS4 permit TMDL application form is one way to get to the forms again. There's the video. This is the page that shows folks that do not have any, the few folks that do not have any waste load allocations or any applicable waste load allocations. And here is the link to get to your customized form. So, okay, back to the guidance. Oh, not that one. This overall overview guidance page also talks about each tab and has some tips and more information. So I would recommend that you read through it. We go back to the TMDL main page. There's also pages for some of the individual impairment or pollutants. So there's a page for chloride, page for bacteria, DO, temperature. There's the list, which is also, excuse me, in the application, but the big list with all of the TMDLs or all the waste load allocations for all permittees. You can download it here. That also, this file also has a tab that has the link to each TMDL project, but we'll talk about that in a second. Back to the TMDL page. Interpreting waste load allocations based on flow and load duration curves. A few folks have asked about if you don't have any reductions at different flows, you should be looking for checking for your mid. If you have a flow-based waste load allocation, so in your application it shows, you know, low, mid, high, extra high. You want to look at you're targeting your waste load allocation at the midpoint. So that's in that information box. The other important part on this TMDL overview page is all of the TMDL toolkit, which is all of the different models that we have made available for folks to help them determine if they are meeting permit requirements or not. The agency has spent a lot of time and resources to make sure that permittees have access to simple models and accompanying guidance that will help you determine if you're meeting your waste load allocations or not. All right, now, let's see, let me go back to this. So that's all on the TMDL page, all of those. The models and the guidance. So the Mike Trojan will be doing a simple estimator demonstration on Thursday of this week. So that Zoom meeting was sent out with the rest of the links for all of these general permit webinars. Okay, other important things that'll help you figure things out. We have this stormwater mapping tool. So you can either go to the municipal stormwater page and scroll down to references, or Google stormwater mapping tool should come up. So it's an ArcGIS web application. Oh, good Lord. Okay. Okay, so this is super helpful. So these initially doesn't look like much. These are all the MS4s, the little yellow boxes. What I wanted to point out to everybody is, so right now, if I click on one of these MS4s, it'll tell you, okay, that's for Baxter, gives you 2 cards. You can scroll through this little caret here. Oops. Because it's zoomed out far enough that it's picking up both Brainerd and Baxter. Okay, what I wanted to show you is if you go over to the layer list, click on that. Then if you expand these MS4 layers, right now we're just seeing the MS4s. You can click on the impaired water. Oh, I think this browser is not working right. I should check this. The important thing to show you was that if you click on this TMDL study area, we have if I zoom in here, this has the bigger. So again, if I clicked on Brainerd or Baxter, picking on them just because that's where I am, I clicked on Baxter. Now when I click on that card, it shows that they're also part of the South Metro Mississippi River sediment TMDL, and you can see that's that blue outline is showing you that's the study area, and that's why they're included. If we click on somebody else, let's see. Click on one of these St. Cloud ones because there's lots down here. Whoa. Oh, and when you zoom in far enough, then the red lines are your impaired waters. So you can click that on and off if it's too much to look at. So for example, we can click on, oh, let's do Sauk Rapids. So you can see up here you have 1 of 5. So that's the MS4. It's the blue outline. You click it, it'll show, it's also Benton County, MnDOT. I was trying to get to is the TMDL. Okay. Again, it shows the South Metro Mississippi as well as Upper Mississippi River bacteria. That should have shown. So it'll help you figure out some of your boundaries for TMDL projects. So again, you click on this little, I don't know how it's called the layer list, little plates, and you can add different options under the MS4 layers to help you see what's going on. There's lots of other things you can add in, but so that's an important resource for everybody. Go back to, and part of figuring out your waste load allocations is, I'm afraid you have to do a little bit of detective work. And so you might need to look at the associated total maximum daily load project itself. And so if you want to look at the reports, or both, either the TMDL report, or if there's an implementation report that might also have some helpful information. Sometimes they split up the categorical waste load allocations in the implementation plan if one was created. So you can get to, on the MPCA website. If you search and up here, total maximum daily load, it'll bring you to this page. Click on the approved tab here. And then you can start typing in, it lists them all out, but there's, you know, a couple hundred. So you can start typing and it should pull something up. So you should look at whatever, oops, Mississippi River, the title of the TMDL or the TMDL project name in your spreadsheet should help you find the project that you want to look at. So then you can click on these and it'll bring you to the project page for each of the TMDLs. This one has a map, has a TMDL report, and then, like I said, some of the older TMDLs also have associated implementation plans, which can be helpful. The other resource that I wanted to point out is that we also have an impaired waters viewer. You can see some information about your impaired waters back on the stormwater mapping tool, but if you wanted more information, you can use the impaired waters viewer, also on the MPCA webpage. And you can put in the water body identification number that is in the application form. Let me think of, oops, oh, sorry. Of course, I picked the wrong one. Anyway, you can put in the identification number and you can zoom into it that way. Or you can also put in, I assume you can put in a name. You can zoom in that way. Okay. And just, so the permit items I showed you before were the application requirements, which is what helped us develop the application form. The permit requirements for bacteria, chloride, and temperature, for example, are all performance-based. So that means you don't have to determine whether the waste load allocation is being met or not. You just have to meet the permit requirements for each of the pollutants if you have them. And you can, again, you can find whether or not you have applicable waste load allocations on that tab in your application form. If there's nothing there, then you don't have any applicable waste load allocations for bacteria, chloride, or temperature. For permit requirements for the oxygen demand, nitrate, total suspended solids, and total phosphorus, if you're not meeting your applicable waste load allocation, so if you make the determination you're not meeting a waste load allocation, you'll report progress towards achieving it in each of your annual reports, which will look similar to the current annual report. Okay, so I see lots and lots of questions in the chat. I saw a couple of questions related to South Metro and categorical, so I'll just do those now. Carly, if you want to unmute like Dwayne and Mike and all them while I go over this, or make them co-host, whatever we have to do so they can talk too. Okay, so first let's just talk about the South Metro Mississippi River TMDL, since it applies to a lot of people. So it's one of the few that has a loading rate per acre, which we did. The intention was, well, it's a large scale TMDL. So it would have been prohibitively expensive to figure out. Anyway, this is how they did it. So loading rate per acre, you look at in the TMDL report, it says the area you're supposed to be looking at is your MS4 regulated area. And we did add a new stormwater manual page. So to help sort of demonstrate how people can figure out what their loading rate would be using either default values, or you can make some changes and figure out what yours is. So let's see. I'm pretty sure, I'm trying to remember where I linked this. And so again, you can Google default TSS and TP loads to help find this. But we'll be making the webinar and the slides available after this, so we'll just be able to click on the links too. I saw a question about baselines for the South Metro. You would put in whatever currently, I don't remember terminology, currently functioning BMPs to help determine what your loading rate is and if that means you're meeting the waste load allocation or not. Okay, and then I had a slide for, oh, there it is. Add in currently installed and functioning BMPs to see if that allows you to meet the loading rate. Okay, categorical waste load allocations is another big question. So you have a categorical waste load allocation. If you have a percent reduction, just use your percent reduction. If you don't have a percent reduction, how do you figure out what your piece of the pie is? Your first step would be to check the TMDL project page. Look at the report to see how the waste load allocation was calculated in the first place. Is there a completed implementation plan? Some have agreed upon target waste loads. You can use the filter ability on the master spreadsheet tab to see what other permittees are included in the categorical, or refer to the TMDL report. And then you should apply the same general methodology as was used in the TMDL to figure out your waste load. They'll say whether they use land cover, jurisdictional area, etc. And I do have shape files for, I think, the majority of the TMDL projects. So we will be working on setting up, I think I'm going to try and get everything loaded onto another FTP site so people can download shape files instead of requesting them from me. But until that's set up, you can request them from me. But I'll try and get that done within the next week. Okay, now we will start on the questions. Carly, did anything come in privately to you that didn't get reposted to everyone, or?
No, I didn't
Okay.
get any privately asked questions.
Okay.
And just so you're aware, Anna, I'm unable to make Dwayne and Mike co-hosts, so they're unmuted. If I request to unmute them.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So
Got it. Okay, let's see. Well, let's just keep out of this. I'll stop sharing for a moment. Okay, let me go find the chat. Let me pin. I got pinned Dwayne up at the top. Oh, here, I can make him a co-host. All right, Dwayne, you should be able to mute and unmute now.
I'm good.
Okay. All right, and I'll make Mike a co-host too. Okay, all right, to the questions. So, 10 o'clock. lot came in. Yay, all right. So we'll just start at the top and work our way down. First question from Joe Fox. If my city has no MS4 owned outfalls or stormwater infrastructure in the drainage area that drains to the TMDL water, which is impaired for TP, do I have to submit modeling and the TMDL spreadsheet? So the broader question is, if you have a waste load allocation, you have to complete the TMDL application form. If you are having, if it's some of these we might have to go through offline to figure things out. Some of the older TMDLs, or if there wasn't sufficient collaboration during the process, they can be problematic, but we'll have to, some of these will have to be answered on a case-by-case basis. All right, so Randy asked, how should an MS4 permittee determine the appropriate land area should consider in addressing a TMDL waste load allocation? A TMDL may include only a portion of a city. There are hardly any TMDLs that included only areas served by an MS4 conveyance system when setting the waste load allocation for an MS4. Do we have to rely on a fuzzy map and a low resolution PDF file? Is the MPCA making all appropriate shape files available to the permittees? And yes, we're working on that. So the next question, has the MPCA provided information to all the MS4 permittees about the baseline year for their TMDLs? How does the baseline year factor into modeling and estimating pollutant load reductions for the permittees? There should be a baseline year in the spreadsheet. It's one of the columns, so that's what should be used. Modeling and estimating pollutant load. So the point of the baseline is that if permittees have installed best management practices on or after the baseline year, those can be counted towards reductions, which I think is what your question is. I think Dwayne addressed the next question about timing. I would, however, like to point out that the video for explaining the spreadsheet has been up since all of the application forms have been out, and the vast majority of the guidance has also been available on Minnesota Stormwater Manual. Randy asks, how many MS4 permittees claim to be meeting a TMDL waste load allocation in their 2013 MS4 permit submittals? And I don't know, and I think I addressed that we are not looking at that in this permit cycle. Dwayne or Mike, feel free to chime in on any of these if you wanted to add anything to those previous questions.
All right.
Can I add something to Randy's previous question?
Yeah, of course.
Randy asked a question about areas that are included in the WLA that may not be actually part of the conveyance. And Wayne or Anna, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the area that was used to set the WLA in the TMDL is the area that the permittee should use. If they want to consider just the area served by their conveyance, they can do so, but they would need to work with Anna, I believe, to get a modification to the WLA.
Right, which I don't think we are pursuing at this point. So people should be using what was in the reports. Yeah. Was there anything else, Mike, that you wanted to address from those earlier questions?
No.
Okay. Dwayne, you good?
Yeah, on the question, how many MS4 permittees claim to be meeting a TMDL waste load in last permit cycle? I don't have an exact figure, but I think it was around 70 something. So just an FYI.
Okay. All right, next question. As we clean the water in the MS4 as part of the waste load allocation, there may be interceding wetlands between the MS4 and the TMDL water body that then bleed out more nutrients, which would be part of the load allocation. Any advice on how to account for that if we want to consider non-MS4 management activities in those receiving waters as part of our greater water resources program?
I can take a stab at that. So this was asked by Ross Bintner, and as Ross notes through some recent conversations we've had, there, the jury is very much out on wetlands, constructed wetlands, and the differences between all of those. Ross seemed to have a pretty good handle on which wetlands within that municipality that he represents, which wetlands are that they're perceiving as waters of the state to be protected under the Clean Water Act. And so municipal discharges to those wetlands should be considered outfalls to those wetlands, and do as much load reductions prior to that point as possible. Those wetlands, like Ross says, ultimately discharge to the impaired water. So if we can clean the water before it gets to the wetland, and what comes out of the wetland should be that much better. We don't let some wetlands get stirred up and actually produce some pollutants. And I know there's a lot of research surrounding that, but I think that maybe answers Ross's question, I hope. If not, let us know.
Okay. All right. From Bobby, since TMDL tracking is new for many MS4s, a determination of treatment at baseline year, current treatment, potential new BMPs to meet required waste load allocation, and finally a compliance schedule will take a significant effort to put together a meaningful program. 12 to 18 months due to back and forth with council/budgeting. Since we only have 2 months to complete after this final guidance, will the MPCA accept only planning this permit cycle and no reductions?
This is Dwayne again. For brand new MS4s, you have a lot to do, and we acknowledge that and we recognize that. And so this is new to those MS4s. And the bottom line in the permit is that progress must be made towards achieving waste load allocations, and progress comes in many forms. There, of course, is the very obvious things like putting things on the ground and in the ground to treat stormwater, but there's also a lot of these other, like they're not structural stormwater BMPs, they are non-structural stormwater BMPs, which would include planning and feasibility studies, for example, and other things, and those would constitute progress in our opinion.
Thanks, Dwayne. Okay, I think we answered. All right, from Jim Koslitchar, sorry if I'm slaughtering that. Is maintenance on a pre-existing BMP of scale to have impact on meeting TMDL something to account for as an improvement? An example would be a pond that has substantial sedimentation as of the baseline year that is then cleaned of all sediment, including that existing during the baseline year.
This is Dwayne again. Typically, pond maintenance is not considered an activity that will actually, that should be used towards achieving a waste load allocation. Pond maintenance is required under minimum control measure number 6, and it's a basic requirement that is an expectation regardless of the circumstances. So the dredging of a pond typically would not be considered, unless Mike Trojan has a different thought on it, typically wouldn't be considered as creditable towards achieving a waste load.
Mike Trojan does have a different take on this one.
Okay.
It seems like Jim is asking if the pond was not maintained prior to the baseline year, and then they came in and did pond maintenance, that would, in my mind, that would decrease the pollutant loading. It's maybe somewhat analogous to fixing an illicit discharge that was present prior to the baseline year. So in this case, I think we're after something that will actually decrease the loading.
All right, well, I would agree with that. If it's after the baseline year, I think it makes a difference. And so I stand by what I said earlier. But if it, if the calculations were prior to the baseline year, then that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think the key words are something that was done to improve street sweeping, for example. You enhanced your street sweeping program, that would count. But if you did the same old street sweeping, no, that wouldn't count.
Thank you. Okay, I think I addressed the South Metro, oh, Mississippi TMDL question, and we are planning, like I said, we are planning to post the recording of this webinar afterwards, and we can also post all the chat questions because I don't think those are part of the recording. All right. Process from Randy. Process calls for permittees to submit information about their future plans and commitments. Examples include planned BMPs to make progress toward meeting a TMDL wasteload allocation and a target date for meeting a TMDL wasteload allocation. Providing such commitments as in a legally enforceable permit submittal is a serious act for a city. Some cities will conclude that such submittals should only be done with the knowledge of and approval by their city council. Getting council review and approval takes a considerable amount of time. For these cities, it may be impossible to get council approval and submit their TMDL application form until long after April 15th, as in months. How should this situation be addressed? Do you want to talk about that one, Dwayne?
Yeah, this is Dwayne again. I did send out a response to Randy Prash's question, basically pertaining to extension requests. And the agency is not opposed to extension requests. However, we believe that folks should be able to actually get us a complete application, even if everything is not entirely known at the time of application. Things are going to transpire. You'll submit the application, which is a snapshot in time, and please provide us with the information you know at that time. As months and years go on during this permit cycle, new things will be discovered, and cities can change course as to what it is they're going to do, and that will be captured next permit cycle. But at least for this permit cycle, there are some things that cities know will be done, even if it is in the form of non-structural BMPs and seeking authorizations from city councils and so on. Put whatever you've got in the application and send it in.
Thanks, Randy. Sorry.
Anna,
Yeah, go ahead.
the previous question from Rachel about the South Metro, you had kind of addressed that earlier, but I don't know if specifically mentioned this, is that because it's based on load, there is no reduction required for that. It's just simply showing what your loading is.
Right. Oh, good clarification. Thanks, Mike. All right, let's see. Sorry, scrolling down. Okay, from Christy Shostel, what if you are implementing multiple BMPs of the same types, T/O and area? Is there a column to track the BMP ID? There is not. Okay, next question. Or does anyone have anything to add on that one?
I don't remember the spreadsheet offhand, Anna, but is there a section for notes? If you could probably make a note somewhere, maybe?
On
Well,
some page, it depends on the BMP tabs. There are not good spots for notes. Unfortunately, there's the only notes option is in the reductions for waste load allocations met tab. Let's see. So it might be one of those things where you have to add information on the actual application form, I think. I'm not quite sure how to work around that one. Let's see. This is probably a good general question. My percent reduction in the TMDL master list and the applicable waste load allocation determination says not available for all of my waste load allocations. Does this mean I do not need to report on these waste load allocations, or is there an error in the spreadsheet? Unfortunately not. It means that they did not determine a percent reduction for MS4s in the TMDL. So you just have the waste load allocation itself to work off of. And here I will maybe, so everyone understands, let's see if we have, I'll show an example. So this is on the applicable waste load allocations determination tab. He's saying that in his column I, 100% reduction, this one you can see does have some percent reductions to work off of. And then there's a bunch down here that is not available. So you would just have to target your waste load allocation itself, which is rough. Okay. Okay. Let's see, sorry, next question. I talked about categorical waste load allocations. Mike, did you see the lumping BMPs? I didn't see your response, sorry.
what does it mean to be lumping BMPs? Is that the question?
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. How do we determine when or if that is appropriate or relevant?
I think certain BMPs lend themselves to lumping. If you have 100 rain gardens that you've put in, you mentioned swales earlier. I think in those situations, it's appropriate to lump those BMPs together as a single BMP. You have to be careful when you do that. That assumes that all the BMPs are properly designed and maintained, of course, but it's just a way of trying to minimize the amount of reporting that has to be done.
Okay, thank you. Okay, many larger BMPs are of sufficient size or cost that they need to be in the municipality's capital improvement plan. The CIP may have been completed before this most recent permit was available and wouldn't be revisited for another year or two. While permittees could list BMPs already in the CIP, listing BMPs prior to at least the next CIP cycle may not be feasible. Would only listing the approved BMPs in the this be what the CIP thus far, and what, let's see, oh, and what is in the CIP thus far be what the MPCA is looking for?
This is Dwayne. I think, again, the application is a snapshot in time. So whatever information is known at the time, that's what we would prefer to see. We're not looking, I know people don't have crystal balls. There's a lot of things you don't know at the time you submit this application form. And again, things transpire over the years. So a snapshot in time, let us know what is going on at the time you submit the app.
Thanks, Dwayne. We anticipate from the City of Prior Lake, we anticipate that source control / street sweeping will be approved as a BMP that can directly address TMDL reduction requirements during this permit term. How should we account for this future credit / reduction in our applications? Yeah, go
Anna,
ahead, Mike.
Yeah, we just on Thursday of last week just got the latest spreadsheet calculator for street sweeping. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get that online within the next week or two. And that would be a useful tool, I think, to get at the street sweeping question here. If I'm reading this question right, it's how can you quantify those reductions? And you could use that tool for that purpose.
And I might add, as tools become available over permit cycles in the coming months and years, the annual report is a wonderful tool to report to the agency about what's being done. So if new credits become available, you're able to report that annually.
Great, thank you. Let's see. So Randy is concerned about the fact that if you go back and change your answers on the applicable determination tab, so what the issue is, if you change your answers on that tab, it won't clear out the information you had previously submitted. So things aren't going to line up right, and I apologize. This is a very complex workbook, and that issue wasn't foreseen. It should have been, and it's my fault, so I apologize. But the issue is here, let me share this again so people understand what I'm talking about. If you put in your answers here and auto-populate, so let me put in a few so I can show. Okay, so we started filling this out. If I go here, put in numbers and then change it, column A and B would change if I went back to the applicable waste load allocations determination tab, but it doesn't clear out all of this information. So it won't, you'd be answering the wrong question. So that's the issue that I pointed out in the video, and I apologize. But I don't think there's any fix for it at this point. So you'd have to transfer the information over to if you resaved it, redid it. Okay, let me go back. Okay, what is the protocol if the MS4 listed in a category decide to work together? Ooh, I think there is some guidance in that on the stormwater manual. So we can look at that, but let's see, people are having issues with the FTP download site. Apparently the link in the chat worked, so use that. How should a permittee with a flow-based TMDL address a situation where there is no listed waste load allocation or a zero pollutant load reduction for the mid-flow condition? If there is probably reach out to me just to confirm. We can take a closer look at it. You're assuming that the baseline for a given TMDL is the year of the most recent, no. Okay, I'll read the whole question. We are assuming that the baseline for a given TMDL is the year of the most recent data that was used in the study. e.g. TMDL study used data through 2011, so is 2011 the baseline, and any project implemented after that should be able to use to demonstrate reductions toward achieving the waste load allocation reductions. Please confirm. Using a later baseline date would be a disadvantage for cities that began implementing projects immediately after TMDL was completed. The vast majority of baseline years in TMDLs are the midpoint of the data. So if the TMDL used data from 2002 to 2011, the baseline is probably like 2006 or 2007. So then with a baseline of 2007, anything that was implemented after that would be used to demonstrate reductions. Somebody's saying the FTP site didn't work with Chrome, but did with Firefox. What is the TMDL study area shown in the MS4 mapping tool? How does this relate to the land area each committee should consider for this TMDL app analysis? So in the MS4 mapping tool, that TMDL study area is the entire TMDL watershed, or the overall drainage area that they looked at as part of the TMDL study. And it does not necessarily, it is not the, there could be a different shapefile showing what boundaries whoever the TMDL writer was used for the MS4 area. So they are not the same, but it does give you an idea of the study area overall and how your MS4 came to be part of a TMDL. All right, from Jennifer. Where did I go? Kaler. If city monitors at points where creeks enter, leave the city boundary, can that be used to demonstrate compliance? E.g. continuous flow water quality sampling. How long must they monitor for a data set to demonstrate compliance with the waste load allocation? E.g. 1 to 2 years. I'm pretty sure we have guidance on the stormwater manual for this, right, Mike?
We do, yeah. There is a, I don't know if you have that available to show now or not, but we do have guidance on the TMDL page on monitoring.
Yeah, where?
It's right below where all the modeling.
Oh, right. Yep. Okay. So in that TMDL toolkit, if everyone's seeing my screen, the monitoring underneath the description of the different models, there's recommendations and guidance for utilizing monitoring to meet TMDL permit requirements for lake, stream, major stormwater outfall, best management practices, etc. So I don't know the recommendations off the top of my head, so I cannot answer the question specifically, but you can find the guidance there. Thanks, Mike. Okay. Shouldn't, yeah. So we talked about baseline. Save the chat. How do you account for waste load area outside MS4s? Not sure I understand the question. Or waste load allocation. I mean, there's a whole process to determine the waste load allocations for wastewater treatment plants in construction and industrial stormwater. That's a different methodology than is used for MS4s.
It's possible this question might have been asking about areas that aren't part of the MS4 that were written into the WLA, and I think it's similar to Randy's question earlier, that use the number that given the area that was given in the TMDL report, even if it's outside of the conveyance, but inside your jurisdictional area.
Right. Yep. Thanks, Mike. Okay. Jennifer Kaler, if a city was historically street sweeping 1 time per year and they expand their program to 2 per year, can they take credit for the second round of street sweeping? What tools are viewed as appropriate for reductions due to increased street sweeping? Yes, if they enhance street sweeping, that is a BMP that we have And as Mike had mentioned before, we have a new calculator. And where will people be able to find that once we get it up, Mike?
There's a new section on street sweeping in the manual. So I think if you were in the manual and you just in the search box type street sweeping, it should show up as one of the links.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Oh wait, let's see. Baseline year should be the year. Well, no, that is, baseline year is whatever they determine it was in the TMDL. And like I said, it's usually the midpoint of the data collection period. It's not from when the water was determined to be impaired. Are we including all BMPs in the study area or just in our MS4 boundary? Our entire watershed drains into the Mississippi River, but only one of our subwatersheds is MS4 regulated. So should we include BMPs in our entire watershed district or just our MS4 regulated area?
I can contribute to this.
Okay.
I think the rule of thumb that is to best be considered is a BMP that is under your operational control that reduces pollutants at your outfall should be considered. And this would include actually BMPs that aren't under your operational control. So a rain barrel program, for example, or privately owned or operated BMPs, if they reduce pollutants in your system and ultimately at your outfall, it is our position that typically credit can be taken for those BMPs.
Thanks, Dwayne.
Yep.
If the land area for an MS4 and a TMDL is larger than the area served by the MS4 conveyance system, should the permittee be able to take credit for all the load reductions achieved within that larger land area? Shouldn't these land areas match? I think this is similar to Dwayne's previous answer.
I think it is.
And yes, they should match, but they don't always, so. Okay, all cities have stormwater management requirements that apply to new/redevelopment projects and is one of the main tools a city can use to improve water quality, especially in fully developed cities that have limited opportunity to retrofit BMPs into the landscape. Can cities take credit for private development that incorporates stormwater management, meaning the watershed management organization/city rules?
I think this answer I gave to go still applies. If there's something that is put in that reduces what comes out of your outfall to the receiving water, you should be able to take credit for that.
Yep. Thanks. And I think there might be some older guidance out there that doesn't match that, so I will try to find it and remove it or flag it. All right, for MS4s filing this TMDL application for the first time, do we only include projects or practices proposed during the permit term, or do we also include any BMPs implemented between the baseline year and 2020? Or are these BMPs just submitted to MPCA during the first annual progress report, regardless of whether they were included in the current application? So I think this answer is, if it is determined they are not meeting the waste load allocation, so they need a compliance schedule. The compliance schedule would include, would not include the BMPs that have already been implemented and are fully functioning. The compliance schedule BMPs would include future BMPs or BMPs that have been recently installed and are not at full operation yet. If they determine they are meeting the waste load allocation, then that's where you would enter whatever implemented BMPs there were. So I'm assuming that question is pointing more towards where they're not meeting a waste load allocation. But yes, then the annual report would capture whatever previously installed fully functioning BMPs for those that are not meeting the waste load allocation. Okay. Lots of questions coming in. Do we plan to provide additional assistance to address them? Won't be enough time in this webinar. We are planning to do some other follow-up webinars. So, and then you can also reach out to me at any time. Sorry, excuse me. Baxter appears to be partially in and partially out of the South Metro TMDL. How do we handle this? I'm pretty sure Baxter does not have an applicable waste load allocation for the South Metro TSS TMDL. MS4 is above, I can't remember what the lock and dam, whatever, don't, or unless they were in the St. Croix, it's in that one slide. Hold on, let me pull it up again. What? Sorry, I lost everything. So for South Metro, MS4s in Minnesota within the St. Croix River Basin or above Lock and Dam 1, except for Crow River, require no reductions. So you don't have to report on your BMPs for the South Metro TMDL. So even if, so that's why it's important to cross-reference both that stormwater mapping tool with the TMDL application form. The TMDL application form will tell you which ones you need to worry about and which ones you don't. The mapping tool will show everything, and not necessarily whether you have an applicable waste load allocation or not. Okay. Can you explain the waste load allocation types and what they mean? Also, why the different flow conditions. If percent reduction is not available, do we need to do anything? If we don't dump water into an impaired water body, do we need to do anything with it? Okay, let's look at the spreadsheet again so we can just look at the oh shoot, I lost the question, sorry, hold on. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, so the different, you'll see this, I picked this as municipality X because it has lots of different things to look at. So you can see usually if it's a lake, so we'll just focus on this side of this column. So you can see that when they are a stream, you usually have different flow conditions and they have different percent reductions. So that's where that page that has guidance for flow load duration curves comes in handy. But like I said, you should be targeting your mid flow. So for this Coon Creek, they would look at the mid flow and target a 19% reduction, and that's what they would want to report on in their application. So they have a mid here, mid 8 there, mid 35 there. That's what they'd look at. So usually for a lake, there's just one waste load allocation, and you can have it either in pounds per day or pounds per year. It's the same number once you multiply it out. And so as you can see, it says there's not a percent reduction available, which means they did not calculate a reduction in the report. So you just have to use the modeling tools to try and figure out what your waste load, what your load is going into Golden Lake, for example. And even if you don't have a direct outfall into an impaired water body, you can still be included in a TMDL waste load allocation, and you still need to report on it. So if the application form is saying you have an applicable waste load allocation, then you have to report. And I think we'll go ahead. Here's somebody.
Yeah, they're also asking what the difference is between individual and categorical
Oh.
waste.
Got it. So, okay, that's a good question, and I probably should have talked about it sooner. My apologies. So an individual means that in the TMDL report, each MS4 or either there was only one, so you got an individual and you don't have to worry about figuring out what your piece of pie is. That's your number, that's your reduction. That's all you have to worry about. In some TMDLs, either because there were a lot of MS4s or, well, there can be lots of different reasons. They just list all of the MS4s that are in a TMDL area and give one number for everybody to share. And so, if that's the case, hopefully there was also a % reduction target for MS4s, so you have a number to shoot for. Otherwise, it gets complicated, which is why, again, you'd have to look at you're going to have to look at the TMDL itself, most likely, to try and figure out how you're going to have to do some calculations to figure out what your target waste load is, so you have something to work towards. And if you need assistance with that, you can reach out to me. Let's see. Okay. Next one. It is important to understand the year the TMDL baseline was established, but also important to know what BMPs were included in that baseline. Correct. Some BMPs were not included at the time. It seems like they should be able to be included now.
I think we already covered that.
Yep. Okay. What is the protocol for a permittee to use its non-DEG report from a number of years ago as a basis of its submittal for the South Metro TSS TMDL? 2013 permit required no increases to TSS and phosphorus, so all these permittees have seen no increase and perhaps significant reductions to their TSS and P loadings. Thus, their non-DEG calcs and report are still applicable. Dwayne or Mike, you want to chime in on this?
The theory or the hypothesis behind that is correct. So all these permittees have seen no increase to their TSS and P loadings. That's the hypothesis part of it. If that part is actually correct, then yes, the anti-DEG reports should be appropriate.
Thanks, Mike. All right, would it be appropriate to use the MPCA GIS web services or MinGeo MPCA data in our TMDL modeling? Is there guidance available to ensure we are using the appropriate data sets? So I'm assuming you're talking about the MS4 boundaries, Nico. Yes, whatever's in the MinGeo commons should be correct for the jurisdictional boundaries for MS4s. That is not what you're asking. Let me can clarify. All right, Grant from Randy. We've always been told that the percent reductions are not enforceable components of TMDLs. Why are percent load reductions now the basis for determining progress or compliance with the TMDL waste load allocation? Doesn't this make the percent load reductions enforceable?
I don't believe it makes them enforceable. We use reductions because they're the easiest thing generally they're the easiest way to look at a TMDL. What's enforceable is whatever's put into a permit in terms of BMPs. I believe, Dwayne, you can chime in on that.
It is. It's whatever's put in the application. The application itself, once public notice, becomes an enforceable part of the permit. The waste load allocations and the percent reductions in TMDLs is basically the goal given to us by the watershed program, and we drive the regulated community towards achieving those goals via BMPs, and that's just that's basically how it works.
Thanks. All right, oh, hold on just a second here. Oh, where is the baseline year located on the spreadsheet that I can share quickly? That is on, oops. Oh, that's not what I need. Oh, I see. Okay. The baseline year is found on the TMDL master list tab in your spreadsheet. If you scroll over, column M is the recommended baseline year for each TMDL project is listed. And I think the vast majority of them have like I said, the South Metro TSS does not because it's a loading rate, but everything else does. That's probably, oh, maybe a chloride one, but that doesn't matter either. Yep, South Metro Mist doesn't have it, but otherwise they do. Let me stop sharing. PCA is suggesting multiple possible methods for translating a categorical waste load allocation into individual waste load allocation for the purpose of this MS4 application. Do all the permittees in a TMDL need to use the same method? If they use different methods, isn't there a good chance that the total of the estimated individual waste load allocations will not match with the total categorical waste load allocation? Which is why they should be using the same method if they go to the TMDL report to see what methodology was used originally. Right. I think we talked about baseline year quite a bit. For our categorical waste load allocation split between a watershed district and up to 5 cities, we intend to jointly complete TMDL application materials and subsequent annual reporting to show collective progress at meeting the overall waste load allocation regardless of MS4 boundary. Do we really need to split the categorical load between individual MS4s? You know, the annual reporting form has an option to indicate whether the implemented BMP was within an MS4 boundary or outside MS4 boundary, but applicable to receiving water. Is this an option for the application as well? Well, that's a good question.
If I understand this question correctly, if there's an aggregator for the cities, generally we're fine with just that aggregator basically covering anything. Capital Region, for example, I believe fills that role for its member cities. I'm not sure if that's the question here, but if the watershed entity is aggregating everything for the cities, that would be acceptable, and the cities can basically refer to that submittal by the watershed entity.
Thanks, Mike. So in that case, does that mean that the aggregator is the only one that completes the application, or just how would they deal with that? I'm trying to walk through.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to, I think they need to submit something, but we probably should talk about that the meeting and figure that out.
All right. Thanks. Okay. Well, maybe, I think we need to do some, I was planning to do some further explanation on the categorical waste load allocations guidance, so we'll add some of that information there. Did Dwayne say that planning BMPs toward meeting the waste load allocation are only an option for new MS4 permittees? What about for existing permittees? No, that's, oh, planning
Yeah.
BMPs. Go
The
ahead.
answer is no. Non-structural BMPs in the form of planning, feasibility studies, whatever, it applies to anybody, whether you're a new or an existing permittee. Anything any permittee can do towards achieving the waste load is fair game for the application.
Dwayne, I agree with that, but what about a permittee who in 2013 said only submitted planning information, and now they're submitting the same for 2020? It's just planning stuff again the second time.
Well, in terms of enforceability, I struggle to say that's totally enforceable. I think our expectation is that we would see progress forward. So if a 2013 applicant tells us the same exact thing here 7 years later, it should raise a brow on our end. I mean, are they making any progress at all? There should be steps forward, and that's what we should see in the app.
Thanks, Dwayne. All right, for the South Metro Miss TSS TMDL for those MS4. So with no required reduction, do we need to include anything in our application materials for this impairment? No, you do not. It should not show up in your applicable waste load allocations determination tab. If it's not in the applicable waste load allocations determination tab, you don't need to report on it. It might be in your master list tab. That's just an informational tab, and it shows all the waste load allocations, whether you need to meet them or not. The applicable waste load allocations determination tab is the important one. All right, yes, we will be posting this recording. About pond dredging. To Dwayne's comment about pond dredging being a permit requirement, almost all structural BMPs are required by the permit, but are still creditable as progress toward meeting a waste load allocation. Whether something is required under the permit is irrelevant toward determining creditability. I think the point is that maintenance of something that's, wait.
Randy, I'm not sure exactly. I don't know if that's a statement or a question or something you needed to be addressed. You can contact me offline and we can chat about that.
All right, related to my BMP ID field question, we have so many, we want to ensure we don't double count or under count. Yeah, maybe if you have a lot, I'll have to see if there's some sort of, we might have to make a modification if you really want to keep track of those, so contact me offline and we can talk about it. All right. Okay. Folks would like a written response, possibly. We'll see about what we can do. But yeah, I will. All right, estimated pollutant load reduction in the tool provided by the MPCA yields a % load reduction. How can a permittee use this tool? And the TMDL did not provide a % load reduction, and the permittee has only the waste load allocation quantity as the basis for their estimate. Great.
Mike, do you have anything for that?
Which tool is that? You think that's referring to the estimator, or?
I would guess so.
The estimator provides reduction in both percent and in pounds. And it also provides a loading rate.
So that, yeah, they can work backwards or forwards. Will you be touching on that at all on Thursday, Mike?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, thank you. All right, cities are rightfully concerned about being required to submit information listing planned with all sorts of uncertainty. BMP is to make progress during this upcoming permit cycle of the next 5 years in a submittal for a legally enforceable MPCA permit. They feel the need to submit some text qualifying their submittal in light of this uncertainty. How should they submit this type of text for the record? In many cases, the city's legal advisors will say that this is necessary for the city's legal protection. I think that would go on the PDF portion of the application under, I don't know it off the top of my head, where you can add in extra information relating to your application. Is that correct, Cole?
Yeah, this is Cole Landgraf here, MPCA MS4 program. Yeah, that would be your best bet, is to use it on the very last question of that PDF form if you have supplemental information. Otherwise, you're also welcome to provide any attachments with your application. Just note, anything in your attachments that will also get posted with your application, any additional attachments gets posted. So even if it's only, maybe a few paragraphs, but you give us a multi-page document and only a couple of the paragraphs are relevant, we're going to put the whole thing on public notice. But yeah, feel free to include anything you want on public notice with your application submittal.
Thanks, Cole. All right, we will put a single word or PDF file listing all the websites that we referenced during the webinar. All right, don't the permittees need a precise map of the land area for their jurisdiction for each TMDL? For each BMP they consider listing in their TMDL application form, don't they need to determine whether it is inside or outside this area? Without a precise map, how should they make this determination for each and all of their BMPs? Well, like I said, we do have the vast majority of those shapefiles are available, and I'll be getting them uploaded. If you need them in the meantime, you can contact me. Oh, there we go. I see. Okay. Dwayne made a comment on privately owned BMPs. A city can only take credit for a privately owned BMP if it wasn't required as part of MPDES construction stormwater permitting. Is that correct?
If I understand the question correctly, I don't think it needs to be tied to construction stormwater permitting. If there are retrofits that take place, if the homeowner were to put a rain garden in their front yard, even though it's not owned and operated by the city, but it was put there and it makes a difference, a reduction in the ultimate in the outfall ultimately from the city, and the city can track that, we would allow credit for that. I think that answers your question, and if not, give me a call. We'll talk about it.
All right. If a watershed organization has built and operates a BMP that reduces pollutant loads to a city's MS4 outfall, should the city take credit for that load reduction? Is the MPCA working to communicate this to the watershed organizations?
I think that gets into our Cat 1, Category 1, Category 2, Category 3 type credit. We have a lot of guidance out there, and this is about annual reporting. We have a lot of guidance out there about the difference between Cat 1, 2, 3 type credit. It really has to do with the regulated jurisdiction in which the BMP lies, as to whether or not it's Cat 1 or Cat 2. But in terms of filling out the application form, The BMP, gosh, Mike, and correct me if I'm wrong, or Cole, I think the BMP needs to lie within the applicant's regulated jurisdiction and have a direct effect on the applicant's outflow. That's what we would expect to be reported in the application. As for annual reporting, if like a watershed district would be able to take Cat 2 or 3, possibly, even though the watershed district had a lot to do with putting the BMP in and managing that BMP, if it's not going to directly affect the outfall of the watershed district, but the outfall of the city, the watershed district would probably wind up taking Cat 2 or Cat 3 credit. I would encourage you to refer to the guidance on Cat 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, this gets kind of complicated, but if it's a categorical waste load allocation and the watershed district puts in a major BMP that cities contribute to and reduces loading to an outfall, the city would be able to list that BMP, but they would have to acknowledge that they didn't own the BMP, that somebody else actually owns it. Yeah, it gets kind of complicated. We do have the guidance on that.
Thanks. Anything else, Dwayne?
No.
Okay. What is the MPCA's guidance to Provenies to estimate the target dates for meeting TMDL waste load allocations? Will some of these dates be quite far in the future? Mike, you had we had talked about this last week. It's some, how do you put it? When you estimate what your annual reductions are going to be, you can forecast that into the future. Yes, in some cases that will be a ways out. The requirement isn't to meet it in this permit cycle, but a reasonable time frame. I don't know that we have specifics for that, so we can work on developing something.
There is nothing black and white about that question,
Right.
nor the answer. We encourage folks to take a serious look at what's going on within their jurisdictions. And, you know, just like with general permitting, there's a lot of words like reasonable, and, you know, we're looking for reasonable. Yeah, 300 years, we would not really perceive as reasonable. So there is some flexibility built in for the regulated community, and we expect applicants to take an educated look, you know, at what's going on in their communities, and give us an educated estimate for a target year. And that's the best I've got for you.
Thanks, Dwayne. All right, I did put the URL for the stormwater mapping tool in the chat. Sorry, couldn't find it. You can also find it under references on the MS4 on the stormwater page, the general permit page. Let's see. Will the TMDL application form be used for future annual reporting for future years under the new permit coverage, and therefore allow MS4s to continue to revise and develop information within this form as new or updated information is available? I think the intent is to modify the current annual reporting forms and not necessarily work off of this application form for annual reporting, but all those decisions haven't quite been made yet. Cole or Dwayne want to chime in on that in case I'm wrong? Or Mike?
This is Cole. Cole Landgraf speaking again. I anticipate it'll be similar to the format of the current annual report. For those of you that are familiar, it's also an Excel spreadsheet like the application form, and it'll be tied closely into what you submit in your compliance schedule. So if you identify BMPs in your compliance schedule, I anticipate we'll transfer that over to the annual report form, and then that's where you will give us an annual update as to how you've made progress, what the status of those BMPs are from your compliance schedule, and how they've translated now. Each year you'll get an opportunity to report on that. If there's been changes, if there's been issues that have come up over time, the end report is going to be the vehicle to submit those status changes.
Anna also mentioned that there might be some minor changes to the annual reporting form. We're very sensitive to the fact that some folks put a lot of time into putting that annual report together, so we want to make sure that if you did that in 2013, you can use the same form in 2020. We don't want you to have to redo the annual report spreadsheet all over again from scratch.
Yep, thanks for pointing that out, Mike. Okay, what is the year of the current final impaired list and corresponding GIS data set? So that impaired waters viewer that I was showing previously is based off the draft 2020 impaired waters list. So if you click that hyperlink on that webpage, it'll bring you to the list. And then I don't think this has an actual downloadable GIS files, just the ArcGIS impaired waters viewer, but you can go to the Minnesota or the GeoCommons to get the 2020 impaired waters shape files. But 2020 is the current draft list. The last EPA approved list was 2018, but we're working out the 2020 list. Okay, how do we find out what BMPs were included with the TMDL report? We can.
I don't think BMPs are included in a TMDL report. They're included in the RAPS or the implementation plan, which is a non-enforceable voluntary list of best management practices. So BMPs that a community implements are what the community comes up with. They can use the RAPS and the implementation plan as guidance and suggested BMPs for reducing the loads that the TMDL is hoping can be reduced, but those are optional.
This question might also be referring to what BMPs were in place prior to the TMDL report. And if that's the case,
Correct.
TMDLs generally don't list those BMPs. They usually will have a loading, and that loading is based on whatever's on the landscape at that point in time.
Right.
I may have misinterpreted the question.
Yeah, either they're both.
Yeah, it could go either way.
Right. Okay, if a TMDL lists a waste load allocation for an MS4 permittee that has no outfalls that drain to directly or indirectly the receiving water, isn't there a good chance that the TMDL is in error? Many TMDLs are less than perfect. Correct. Many TMDLs are less than perfect. But if some TMDLs took a very broad view of what should be included in the drainage areas. So some of those large scale ones, if you're in the watershed, you have a waste load allocation, whether you feel that's appropriate or not. Which I think, would you have something to add, Dwayne?
No, it sounds like Randy is making an observation and not asking a question.
Right. Okay. Jane, Byron, one thing I hope the MPCA keeps in mind as applicants fill out this form is that cities are not always consulted on MS4 drainage area when large categorical TMDLs are completed. This leaves communities like the one I represent that are the rural urban edge in a bind. When listening to your earlier answers, it sounds like the MPCA is expecting our community to account for loads from agricultural areas that we have no authority over in our waste load allocation because there was insufficient effort made when the TMDL was developed to determine actual MS4 drainage area. We're held responsible for agricultural activities because the city boundary was used as the MS4 contributing area and not the actual MS4 drainage. Or did I misunderstand your earlier answers to this question? There's two parts to this. One is you are not held responsible for agricultural activities, but they may have been used, if they used a larger contributing area, that should actually give you a larger waste load allocation to work with. You still are not responsible for agricultural activities. So you're only responsible for your regulated area. You can use the appropriate drainage area to figure out what your reductions are. Do you have anything to add, Dwayne?
Not at the moment. Mike?
No, I think we've talked about this, that yeah, there are situations where loads that don't seem to make a lot of sense are actually included in the WLA, and cities can choose to keep those and address them, or they can try to petition out of them in some fashion if they can demonstrate the drainage area is different than what was in the TMDL. We're willing to work with the cities in that situation to better define what WLA should be.
Thanks. All right, what does it mean for calculating load reductions if the MPC recommended baseline year is listed as not applicable in the spreadsheet? Okay. So I think we've talked about this in relation to the South Metro MIST. If you have other questions, you can reach out to me because I thought they should all have baselines. How should a permittee fill out the TMDL application form if they are working with an aggregator on a categorical waste load allocation? I think we will provide some more information on that after this. Okay. We will send out a message with where we'll be posting this when it's done. I don't think we've decided that yet. It will probably go on the stormwater manual somewhere. Let's see. Let's see. What do we do with the listed wraps? Aren't we expected to address just the TMDL waste load allocation embedded in the wraps? Wraps, so the wraps is a watershed restoration and protection strategies. They're not binding. I think a lot of the projects are titled wraps because they were usually bundled together, but you're actually reporting on a TMDL. That was US EPA approved. Wraps are not regulatory, so. Is there a list of BMPs associated per each type of TMDL, like TSS, TP, oxygen demand? I do believe there is on I'm pretty sure I included under the compliance schedule BMPs tab on the here, I'll share this on the guidance page for completing the MS4 permit TMDL application form. If you scroll down to the compliance schedule BMPs tab, there's a couple of spreadsheet that'll assist you in determining where they can fit and which ones can provide quantifiable reductions. I think that is the helpful one. Oh, it's under both the BMPs tabs. Do you have anything else, Mike, that would be helpful?
I believe on the guidance page, the main TMDL guidance page, we also have pages, individual pages for the different pollutants too.
Right. Yeah, so this one has a list of BMPs and which quantifiable reductions it can apply to.
I might add that oxygen demand is a tough one, and
Right.
you can't really measure oxygen demand easily, so the guidance on that now is kind of pointing towards managing phosphorus and organic material in your runoff.
Thanks, Mike. Let's see, I think we talked about the cities responsible for agricultural loads inside the MS4. No. And Randy, what should a permittee do if they believe that a TMDL waste load allocation is erroneous for any multiple possible reasons? They should reach out to me on a Bosch. And that is the end of the questions for now. We were going to do a quick poll on if folks would like some follow-up webinars. Maybe people can just put in the chat what they would like to see follow-up on related to the 2020 MS4 general permit, whether it's specific TMDL application issues or specific parts of the permit itself or the application. If people would enter into the chat what they would like to see a future webinar on, we will work on putting that together. Want to thank everyone for participating today. Hopefully this clarified a little bit. I understand this is complex and it requires a lot of work, and we are doing our best to provide you the resources that you need to get it filled out in a timely manner. Please reach out to me. I will put in my information in the chat, or actually I'll just share this that slide with my.
Anna, while you're doing that, I can
Yep.
briefly remind folks that I am doing a session on Thursday on the estimator. It's only an hour and it's only an overview of the estimator. We do anticipate offering some training on the estimator later this year. So I set it up as a Zoom session because that's what I'm most comfortable with, and I believe Zoom has a 100-person capacity. I don't think that there's going to be 100 people listen to me. In case there are, I apologize, and we could always have a second session if it ends up being that way. But it is just an overview session. It's not an actual training session, which we anticipate doing later this year.
Thanks, Mike. All right, so yeah, if people just want to, I'll resend the link. Oh, I'll grab that. Let's see, I don't know if I have it. Do you have the link, Mike, that you could throw into the chat for everybody to the Zoom meeting on Thursday?
I'll go grab it. It's going to take a minute.
Yep, sure. Oh, let's see. Oh, looks like Amy threw it in for everybody. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Amy.
Except I don't know that the link works. All right, yes, any other further webinars, you can throw them in the chat. We'll, our topics, oh, there's the link. Perfect. Future topics. We'll leave the chat open for a few minutes for people to put in their requests. Otherwise, thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. Reach out to me if you have specific questions. I'll do my best. And like I said, we'll work on getting those shape files out available easily for everybody.